So about a week ago, I watched a video on YouTube titled May 31st, 1989, Last Day of High School, Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Look at Tim's beautiful hair, remember this. I'm 37th out of place.
And before I knew it, I'd fallen down a rabbit hole of these old grainy videos of random events filmed before I was born that served as a weird sort of time capsule that captured what life was like before the internet. And before I knew it, I was up all night binging this content, feeling nostalgic for a time that I've personally never even experienced. And it suddenly dawned on me that classic old movies like Fast Time at Ridgemont High were based more in reality than I'd previously imagined. And purely in the sense that art often imitates life in ways that make thinking of the good old days nostalgic for reasons I'll attempt to explain in this video.
Wait a second, we got pretty girls coming. Where?
Odd characters who perhaps aren't even aware they're now essentially viral on YouTube perused the hallways and literally went scouting for pretty girls. And with the aforementioned movie in mind, I began suddenly yearning for a time when things were more fast. And in contrast to modern day, both physically and culturally, I realized that if the movie came out today, it wouldn't be called Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but instead would be called Remember Life Before Everyone Was Addicted to Facebook and Jerking Off? And not only that, there was a wide array of little subtle differences in contrast to how schools were when I was still in them, as well as how I imagine they are today.
It's little differences. I mean, they got the same shit over there that they got here, but it's just there, it's a little different.
For instance, if you've ever looked in older people's yearbooks from generations ago, people's faces seem to bend and shift throughout generations, and the late 80s crowd seemed to have more chiseled and defining facial characteristics. In comparison to millennials or Gen Zers, just round, featureless, sad. Chins don't really happen anymore unless you're that kid from the Hunger Games. Or just everyone worked out back then. And every year, millennials and Gen Zers are looking less like this and more like this. So naturally, I became curious and began scouting for answers, or at least an explanation. Are today's youth inevitably damned to be victims of an antisocial, depressing, and isolated smartphone reality that cannot get better, but can only get worse? During my search for the answers to my many questions, I stumbled upon Katie Davis's critically acclaimed book, The App-Generation, which was written after countless interviews and research put together by Harvard University, which explored many of the unanticipated consequences of the world becoming a technology-dependent, interconnected nightmare.
This is a depressing story about depression.
Of course, the book did nothing but reinforce what I already know, so this video isn't necessarily going to be me parroting what I read, but instead will be me using the knowledge I learned to better theorize that humanity will ultimately continue to get worse until it ultimately implodes on itself, and those fat things from the movie WALL-E will become real life. So buckle up, do the like and subscribe thing. This is the Digital Dystopia, the App-Generation in TikTok Proper-Ganda. That doesn't look normal. Why does it look like that? It looks like pubes. Okay, all I have to do is make tea and then I'll start the video. Oh shit. It's fucking overflowing! Alright fellas, so before we get into it, which if you watched my channel before, you're most likely already aware of this or you're semi-tired of hearing about it. But I feel it may be necessary to rattle off a few statistics because yeah, I mean it's obvious that self-esteem in correlation to social media and the complete lack of face-to-face socializing with actual people in a real actual setting or location, it's obviously going to negatively impact the health and well-being of a young and developing mind. But some of these statistics are actually kind of scary if you think about how fast they're climbing in recent years.
The reality is that suicide rates for teenagers are climbing, and it's alarming.
So here we go. Number 1, 63% of Instagram users, when asked, claim to be unhappy. Number 2, anxiety has increased by 70% for adolescents in the past 13 years. Coincidentally, right when smartphones came out, is when this study was made.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator. An iPod, a phone.
Number 3, teen suicide has climbed 30% in recent years. Number 4, and this is a good one, 1985, 18% of college freshmen reported symptoms of extreme anxiety, and now that number has climbed to 41%. And also, 17% of teens claim to have life-threatening anxiety to the point where they're often suicidal. The last one is that today is the first time in human history where suicide is the leading cause of death in people below the age of 25.
I reckon I ain't got no alternative.
So that's pretty depressing. And of course, some scholarly douchebag scientist that doesn't agree with my take on these matters is always gonna be there to deny what's clearly causing these issues and say, this situation is quite nuanced and there's many defining factors not being taken into consideration. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not nuanced at all. It's actually quite clear what's causing this. The Zuckerbergs of the world made shitty addictive websites that harm more people than they help, younger people don't go outside or socialize anymore, and porn addiction amongst young men has contributed to an exponential decline in their well-being. And here's what's interesting, or maybe it's just interesting to me, I don't know, is that you can't really talk about the general things I talk about on this channel without mentioning Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan. Because just about every book I've read pertaining to anything involving technology in relation to how it positively or negatively impacts society all boils back to his most popular book, The Medium is the Message, which one pretty much predicted the World Wide Web way back in the late 60s. And not only that, but this guy focused heavily on the concept of any sort of screen or medium and how it essentially has the ability to lull people into a false sense of how the world outside their window functions or operates, be it in the form of propaganda, fear-based advertisements, social control, politics. And I've said this before, and this is a pretty generic cookie cutter, I guess, take on this harmful effects of social media, but I think people are starting to wake up to the possibility that it's no longer good for a human's emotional well-being to constantly, with the hit of a few keys or clicks of a few buttons, to be an arm's reach away from seeing all their peers pre-packaged sorta only show the happy side of my life phony version of everyone they know, condensed into this never-ending, scrolling, perpetual bombardment. That's what it is, it's a bombardment. And what Katie Davis points out, and what McLuhan essentially warned us about from way back when,
in the early 50s, you predicted that the world was becoming a global village. We're going back into the bicameral mind, which is tribal.
Is with this new social media reality we've just sort of blindly stumbled into, and quickly, by the way. I mean, up until the mid-2000s, technology kind of slowly staggered at a crawling pace, and then it really just skyrocketed in the past decade, and we're still warming up to social media and getting used to it, and Elon Musk is already let's put it in their fucking head, see what happens. It's slow down first. Let's figure out. And my point is that adolescents barely have time to work on improving their internal sense of self. Kind of their goals, accomplishments, quirks, personalities. And there seems to be an eternal struggle between the real you and the alter that you carefully present to the outside world in a pre-packaged way. So before we go any further, I feel it's necessary to point out that much like world history having different periods that signify where we're at on a sort of time scale in regards to progress, be it the Middle Ages, postmodernism, post-industrial age. One interesting thing this book pointed out was that the same general concept of where we're at on the scale applies to the digital and internet age as well. And it can be categorized into 3 distinct, I guess you could say, ages that reflect things like how technology became interwoven into our daily lives, how we use it, and what impact it has on society. Starting with the pre-digital age, which nostalgic millennial bastards like myself tend to consider the glorified heydays of the Wild West internet, then the middle digital age, which we're in now by the way, and what comes next, inevitably, is the post-digital age. Now it's important to understand or remember that although millennials and Gen Zers aren't too far off when it comes to the age gap, I mean, what is it, only 6 to 10 years that separates the 2 generations? There's actually a huge difference in how the internet, as a medium, was when we came into adulthood, and although we're close in age, we're practically from entirely 2 separate freaking universes, considering how the internet has aged in such a short amount of time. For instance, I'm old enough to remember a childhood that was relatively free from a lot of the hardships that Gen Zers have to suffer through today. And the pre-digital age was essentially the time period where physical products like newspapers began to become digital, social media was brand spanking new and dare I say kinda hip before everyone's grandma had one. YouTube's logo was broadcast yourself and wasn't yet corporatized and fueled by monetization and clout. Censorship barely happened, and nobody cared about privacy because we didn't know yet that we were being 1984'd. So given the fact that the pre-digital age had so many great qualities that pretty much lured everyone in, be it connecting with friends, meeting new people,
You've got mail.
a bottomless pit of valuable information, and let's face it, an endless supply of beautiful women who will do anything, and I mean anything, on camera. It sort of kind of feels like we were like lured in and tricked, and we're all kind of looking at each other now like, maybe this wasn't as good as we thought it was gonna be. So what I'm saying is we bit the apple, and Steve Jobs' stupid logo is starting to make more sense. In Generation Z and Gen Alpha and all the ones that come after that, I worry, are currently absorbing mostly the negative consequences that the current mid-digital age has to provide. And the entire point of this video, and a question you may be asking is, what are the negative effects of the current mid-digital age Gen Zers are suffering through that didn't necessarily affect the millennials?
Staying away is nearly impossible.
Well, let's think about this for a second. I have no evidence to support this claim, obviously, but I imagine if you asked a 19-year-old right now what his or her biggest modern-day fear is, they'll probably tell you that it's getting canceled, publicly shamed or humiliated, or ostracized by their peers for having the wrong opinion. Given the fact that being crapped on by thousands of people is no longer a temporary hardship that people my age didn't have to worry about, but is actively ruining people's lives, relationships, and sometimes future careers. And one of the weird unanticipated consequences of this is that, like, now every influencer or YouTuber, celebrity has to go along with this out of fear, and the internet now is mostly this, like, safe, boring, corporatized hellscape, and every thumbnail looks like this. And on a quick side note, if you think YouTube's gotten bad, which is arguable, I mean, some channels are still kinda good, check out this TikTok phenomenon, which the youth are apparently just gobbling up like there's no tomorrow. And there might be some good stuff on there, I don't know, I've never used it. But I've seen some videos floating around, and to this day, I have yet to see a video that wasn't someone just like angrily spitting facts directly into the camera, No humor, production value, or entertainment, just stuff like this.
This use of the word obesity stems directly from the BMI, which was created by a eugenicist with no medical training who based the scale only on white bodies and cow math. Fatness is not an epidemic. Fat people existed before capitalism.
I mean, what am I supposed to even say to that? You know, like, okay, she's not wrong. And I mean, bless her heart, I'm not trying to take a jab at her, but what is her audience? You know, what do they do when they go home, their parents at the dinner table, hey son, what'd you learn on TikTok today? You know, just the outdated science of ranking obesity using white bodies and cow math. Oh yes, cow math, I see. It's good to learn proper American history, otherwise we're doomed to repeat it. And on a quick side note, and not to deviate too far from the subject of this video, because I'm already working on a TikTok video that you can see in the future by hitting that subscribe button. Oh, and if you want to skip this part, just go to this timestamp. I constantly find myself wondering, why are younger people blindly believing in all this blatantly horseshit misinformation that seems to be spreading around TikTok like it's the freaking plague? And once in a blue moon during my research, I stumble upon some information that makes me go, bingo. Freaking bingo. And I gotta warn you that what I'm about to tell you that I found in Katie Davis's book is gonna make almost too much sense. So here we go. So throughout history, the way human beings and societies role model themselves and receive, say, guidance, be it from the media, their peers, their surroundings, has come in many different phases in which mediums and technology have directly influenced what information they consume, and not only that, how said information spreads around, which can be categorized into three distinct, classes of people. And those three are the tradition-directed individual, the inner-directed individual, and the newly emerging other-directed individual. So the tradition-directed individual can be described as individuals who look to examples of those who came in preceding generations for patterns of what to believe, how to behave and conduct themselves. When I learned this, I immediately thought back to the 1920s Prohibition era, in which the youth tended to be more uniform. And literally, by the way, they literally wore uniforms and boater hats and looked up to the generations that came before them for guidance. And the youngins would be all like, oh, I'm finally going steady with Mr. Miller's daughter, who owns a shoe store on 5th Avenue. I'm thinking of proposing, and the firm might even offer me a promotion. I plan on making a name for myself in this world, and it's gonna be swell. And the old role model guys would be like, that sounds mighty keen. That Mr. Miller's daughter is a real catch. And the kid would be like, yeah, she knocks me out, that Mr. Miller's daughter. And people tended to get their information from newspapers, and things were based more heavily on a black and white sorta strict moral compass handed down by generations. Fast forward to the 60s baby boomers, and the tradition-directed individuals began to die out. And the inner-directed individuals began with the beatniks and the flower power hippies, who began focusing more on developing an internal compass, where the youth began governing their own behavior and belief systems off of their own critical thinking on what is morally right or socially acceptable. So everybody started dropping acid, banging each other, liberalism was born, and modernity became, modernized. People got their news from television, and as traditionalism died out, the boomers rejected the old way of doing things and onward and upward. Now this is where things start to get interesting, and all this TikTok stuff starts making more and more sense.
Who based the scale only on white bodies and cow math. Fat people existed before capitalism and before colonization. Fat phobia is a direct result of anti-blackness.
The newly emerging other-directed individuals, and I'm going to read this verbatim from the book. Other-directed individuals reject getting information from neither the tradition-directed individuals, who came before them, nor the inner-directed individuals, who rely on self-constructed value systems. Instead, newly emerged other-directed individuals look to the examples of their neighbors, peers, role models, and certified experts about where they get their information from. And let me add one little part, this isn't from the book, but often without knowing real history or using critical actual thinking. I mean, come on, if you boil that down, which I have boiled it down, it basically means if some little purple-haired commie or a douchebag said it on TikTok, then it must be true. And if it is true or if it isn't true, hey man, free speech, always. But like, I never thought this would happen, and I'm really starting to feel old, because like, I remember as a teenager, I would see news reporters, they would say stuff like, "It's 2 a.m., do you know what your kids are up to?" And we would laugh, because in reality we were like, virtually running people over in Grand Theft Auto in a pixelated stolen car to the tune of Down with the Sickness by Disturbed. "Hey bro, pass me another Mountain Dew." Wah! But now it's more like, hey parents, do you know what your kids are doing? I mean, what the fuck is this shit, honestly? Are they echoing anti-capitalist talking points, maybe? Maybe you should look into that. In other words, has your child recently become an expert on the inefficiency and societal implications of cow math?
White bodies and cow math.
I mean, that's all I want to know. Maybe, perhaps, look into that. Because I used to be able to count the amount of internet communists I'd see with both hands and maybe a few toes. But as far as I'm concerned, there seems to be so many on TikTok now that they're climbing through the fucking window. And you may be thinking, so what? These young daft idiots don't know what they're talking about, and it's only one or two of them. No, there isn't. I literally downloaded the app yesterday to make this video about phone addiction and the app generation. And within an hour, I counted like 40 of them. 40 pink-haired teenagers ranting directly to the camera about white supremacy, Western colonialism, anti-capitalism, and cow math. It's like that Pink Floyd video where the kids go into the machine and come out the other end all fucked up and unrecognizable, saying the same shit the last one said. One of them watches one, repeats what the last one said, and for the next person to say. And it's like they're all stuck in a perpetual loop of talking horse shit and repeating it. I could make this video and post it on TikTok tomorrow, and according to this book information about the spread of misinformation by parroting your peers, it would immediately become gospel. Yeah, so I'm cooking eggs right now, and I was reading earlier that the process of cooking eggs, it's deep-rooted in Western colonialism and white supremacy. And it was based off of a eugenicist who used cow math. It was very white supremacy-y. And this all boils back to obesity. They force-fed a cow. They based it off of the metrics of cow math. Those eugenicist bastards. They thought they could get away with it. I don't know. Follow me on TikTok. I'm gonna go back to cooking my eggs, but just remember they are rooted in white supremacy and cow math. Oh, shit. And some 12-year-old would see it and go, I don't know, he's not wrong. Anyway, I don't even know what this video is anymore. It was supposed to be about phone addiction, but quickly evolved into a TikTok video. So let's take the given information and attempt to segue perfectly into the conclusion/solution. But real quick, before I do that, and if you don't believe me about the vapid and insane amount of bizarre misinformation on TikTok, I want you to check out this channel that practically specializes in connecting TikTok to the outside world in its most condensed, purest, concentrated form. The channel's called Mike vs. Everyone, and there's actually so much of this crap that I'm pretty sure he makes these TikTok videos daily.
Some of this stuff is so bizarre that it literally makes my head spin. And it just shows you how far gone these people are. They're gone, and the police officers realize it. They're like, I can't have a conversation with you.
I've talked to him a few times in the comments. He's a super nice dude, so go check him out. Alright, so let's hurry this up and get to the ending. So overall, I kind of eventually forgot that the intro revolved around the nostalgic journey the pre-internet age videos brought me down, and I didn't intertwine the rest of the video with that premise as much as I would have liked to, but something about seeing a video where a bunch of teenagers inadvertently smashed their own windshield because they were so bored they decided to hit snowmen with the full impact of an early 90s SUV made me kinda go,
turn it off, it's stabbing me in the fucking heart.
And although I will say that the internet and digital age has brought humanity so many great things, be it unlimited information, connection, worldviews that are perhaps alien to our very own, and in a good way, I'm beginning to wonder if the downsides are more downplayed than we really even capable of understanding yet. And how maybe the kids perhaps aren't as alright as we might think they are. And all of the above mentioned issues I discussed in this video, and I'll admit I was kind of all over the place and possibly bit off more than I could chew with this one, could be counteracted with humankind's old standby term, moderation. An interesting tidbit of information I learned from this book was that something around only 13% of the youth who use phones or computers, internet technology, only use said tech as a creative outlet for GarageBand or Photoshop, stuff that enhances creative expression or productivity that isn't revolved around posting self-centered narcissistic crap that may potentially connect you to your peers, but ultimately does so in a dark-tinted room in an augmented way that will only further you down a path of self-isolation and increase your chance of feeling symptoms of depression and anxiety. That much is obvious. You don't need me to tell you that. And even worse than that, subtract all the addictive natures and things you can almost grasp physically or mentally, and try to think of things from more of a cultural or societal perspective, and a lot of baggage has come along with that as well. Hence the TikTok portion of this video.
White folks have been marketing fatness as a black trait. Our white ancestors started the looting.
That wasn't even supposed to be in this video, quite frankly. And whether you choose to believe me or not, a lot of the TikTok stuff I watched was ultra progressive and typically revolved around a lot of hot button issues regarding race, LGBT related culture war stuff. At first glance I could see the argument being made that like, oh wait a minute now, you disagree with what I'm saying about this race related issue? Oh, duly noted. I guess you're a part of the problem then, aren't you? It was based off of the eugenicist who used cow math. See ya. You're gone. You're gone from all platforms, social media, and public square.
Please don't teach.
Anyway, that's it. We'll see what happens. I am merely a messenger whose job is to shine light on trends both digital and dystopian. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, do the subscribe thing. This video took forever to make. I honestly feel pretty burnt out over it. I'll probably make a part 2 eventually, but check the description. It's going to have all my social medias, alternative platform stuff. Thanks for watching.